As we all know, the natural world is much more than just a simple food chain. It's a whole web. It's large ecosystems, small ones, biospheres, all sorts of different crazy relationships. And one of those is what we call symbiosis. And that's what I want to talk about today, are 5 good examples of symbiosis in the reptile, or more like herpetile world, which basically means reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. Now, there are basically 3 different categories of symbiosis that we think about when talking about the natural world and generally with plants and animals and fungi. And that is the first one, which is mutualism. Mutualism is when both species benefit from each other. The next one is called commensalism, and that basically means is that one of the species greatly benefits from the other one, and that other one doesn't necessarily get benefits or anything negative about that relationship. An example of which would be the African elephant and the dung beetle. Dung beetle needs the African elephant to do its things, so that way it can continue its life cycle, what it uses it for, and the African elephant probably doesn't even know that it exists. The last of which is parasitism, and which means parasites. That is the third one, and trigger warning, we will be giving one example of that at the end of the video. So let's get into the 5 good examples. The first of which has to do with one of the largest species of reptiles on the planet, and that is the Nile crocodile. When I say they're one of the largest, I mean that. They rival the estuarine or the saltwater crocodile in size, weighing more than 1,500 pounds and can get almost 20 feet long. They're hypercarnivores, which means that's all they eat is meat. And they are responsible for more than 100 human fatalities a year. So we're talking about one of the big bads, right? However, there is one animal that is often seen with the Nile crocodile that they don't ever really seem to predate, and that is the Egyptian plover. Nile crocodiles, obviously, they spend a good majority of their time in the water, but they often come out to bask on the river banks. While they're doing that, you will often see them with their mouths open, and that is to help with their thermal regulation. During that time, you will see that Egyptian plover, this little water bird, go in and out and around the groups of crocodiles that are basking on the Nile banks, and you will see them go into, around, and go stepping into their actual mouths and picking at their teeth. Number one, any animal that spends a lot of their time in the water, when they come out, a lot of insects, mainly flies, are attracted to them. And so the plovers will actually sit there and eat those little insects. In addition, they're actually picking at individual bits of leftover meat in between their teeth. Biologists originally think that it probably has to do with trying to help them prevent diseases and infections by keeping their teeth clean. We've learned a lot about crocodilians and their immune system since then, so that may or may not necessarily be true, but they certainly do benefit from the crocodiles being there. So this was a very good case of either mutualism, where the plover obviously gets plenty of meals and doesn't get eaten by the crocodile, and the crocodile gets some free dental work, or at least commensalism, or so that way that commensalism, there we go, we got there, to where the plover benefits from it, and while the crocodile does benefit from having the flies, they're not really necessarily bothered, and the actual benefits of the plover picking at their food in their mouths may or may not actually, may or may not be beneficial or detrimental to the reptile's health. This next one is probably that any of the people that you guys who keep reptiles, or more specifically invertebrates, is waiting for me to talk about. And that is the Colombian lesser black tarantula. This is probably the most internet famous invertebrate in the world, with the exception of possibly the murder hornets, thanks 2020. And this is the one that keeps a pet frog. Down in the rainforest of Colombia and other parts of South America, this lesser black tarantula, it's a very large New World spider, not a true spider, that's tarantula, and they are well known for predating on more than just insects. They will also eat small mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians, including frogs. However, when they happen to grab one specific type of frog, a type of dotted humming frog, it will actually grab them and almost inspect them with their little front legs, and they will inspect them, and they actually realize that what species that is, and they will take it back to their burrows. And when they do that, they actually keep the frog there, and they use that as kind of pest control. When spiders molt, they're incredibly soft and very delicate and very, very vulnerable, not only to larger predators, but to small little invertebrates as well, i.e. ants and very similar species like that. they can attack a freshly molted tarantula where it is too weak and too fragile to defend itself or to get away. And so having that little humming frog in that tarantula's burrow lets it so that way it will eat the ants that would potentially harm the spider, as well as if it's a female spider, which it's mostly been observed that they are the female tarantulas doing this, that will also help keep ants away from the tarantula's eggs. In addition to that, the little humming frog now has one of the scariest bodyguards on the planet able to give them a home. So what this example of mutualism, which basically starts out as the scariest case of kidnapping ever, results in free room and board for this species of frog and awesome pest control to the tarantula. Next up, this is going to take us over to the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands being very famous for their very diverse and unique animal species, as well as when he wasn't marrying his cousin or studying barnacle reproductive organs, Charles Darwin helped prove his theory of evolution and species diversity. Here we have, obviously, the giant tortoises, the famous Galapagos finches, but also the marine iguana. The marine iguana is unique among all the different iguana species in the world, where they're actively diving in salt water into the oceans and eating underwater vegetation. Now, when they come out of the water, they're basking on the beaches, usually in very large numbers, and as we talked about previously with the Nile crocodile and other aquatic reptiles or animals, when they come ashore, lots of insects, mainly flies, are attracted to them. And so, in this whole large group of flies and marine iguanas, there is a third species that is very, very often seen with them, and that is the little lava lizard. Lava lizards are a very, very diverse group of animals. They're found in a lot of different species across multiple islands, and specifically the Galapagos Island one is called lava lizard, probably because it is named after the essentially cooled lava that formed the Galapagos Island chain, as well as in the males, they have a very bright red throat and dewlap. So, lava lizard. These guys are omnivorous, where they're eating plant, vegetation, flowers, and fruits, but also they gorge themselves on insects. And so, when you have a huge group of animals that attract their essentially food supply of flies, you will see lava lizards crawling in and amongst and on top of these marine iguanas. That this is another example of either mutualism or commensalism, where whether or not the marine iguanas are truly bothered by the flies, the lava lizards definitely benefit from the marine iguanas there. So it could be a case debated on which, again, scientist or biologist or person on the internet you want to pick a fight with that. This next one is actually probably the closest to a true, like, Marvel Venom symbiote. And that is truly what it is. And that has to do with a species of amphibian, and that is the spotted salamander and a type of green algae. Now, we all can associate, like, we know how salamanders work. They're, as adults, they come back into their little water habitats, they lay their eggs, they metamorphose into their larval form, staying underwater, and then turning into their adult form, they leave the water and then go back underground. While they're in the water, in vernal springs and small ponds, they're always associated with a lot of algae. And this was first seen over 100 years ago, where there seemed to be some sort of bond between the spotted salamander, specifically spotted salamander eggs and larvae, and this one type of algae that I will put its actual name right here, but it generally translates to egg-loving. And now, thanks to the power of science, we've actually determined that they do in fact have a true symbiosis, where the algae cells actually infiltrate and are inside of the cells of the salamander eggs and growing individuals into eventual full adult animals, where eventually, essentially, the algae cell death goes down to where the amount of cells present in adult animals is nil. So that is truly a symbiote, to where the algae cells, the actual cells of the plant algae, get into the cells of the living eggs of the salamanders. And they did do tests where essentially they had salamanders that would never be exposed to algae did grow, develop, and emerge into their larval state and grow into healthy adults. However, they grew more rapidly, much smaller, and didn't seem quite as fully as developed as others that had been exposed to those algae cells and it being present. In addition to that, the green algae that had never been exposed to the salamanders, either just in the same container or with the possibility of them actually converging together. and they found that the green algae that had never been exposed to them did in fact never grow as robustly and never had as quite as a healthy population as it would when it would be exposed to those salamanders. So that is a true symbiosis. And they do think that there might be other species of amphibians out there that also have this same symbiosis, because there are plenty of other amphibians that have this same observed, essentially, bond or relationship with this type of green algae or other types of green algae. So again, this is a true symbiote when it comes to this type of reptile, the spotted salamander. Okay, last up, I gave you a warning at the beginning, final trigger warning. This is where we're talking about the parasitism. So, this is another one that a lot of reptile and, again, invertebrate aficionados may have seen coming, and that is the Tarantula Hawk. The Tarantula Hawk is an absolute monster of an insect. This is one of the largest species of wasp in the world. They're found all over the world, and they, in fact, don't really want anything to do with people. However, they have been described as having one of the most painful stings in the world. One researcher described it as, quote, immediate, excruciating, unrelenting pain that shuts down one's ability to do anything but scream. So obviously, don't really want to get stung by one, but it doesn't really happen very often. You really have to be pestering the thing to actually ever get some sort of reaction from them. Albeit, it is pretty scary to see a 3-inch black wasp buzz by your head. Now, as I said before, these guys are found all over the world, and this is one of the largest species of wasps, specifically one of the largest species of parasitoid wasps. But adults don't actually eat spiders or tarantulas. They're actually nectivorous, which essentially means, like butterflies, they get most of their nutrition from pollen and other plant nectar and even parts of fermenting fruit. It's actually been documented that some of them who eat that fermenting fruit will actually get intoxicated. That's right, drunk, 3-inch, the most painful sting in the world, insects just passed out drunk. It's hilarious. However, they do get their name Tarantula Hawk for a reason. Now, when it comes to reproduction, what happens is the female Tarantula Hawk will find an adult tarantula, and they will use its sting to paralyze the tarantula. And then they will drag the tarantula back to a burrow and lay a single egg on the spider. And they actually found out that if the egg is unfertilized, it actually hatches out as male, which is really weird. But if the egg did get fertilized by a male Tarantula Hawk, it will actually hatch female. But either way, it'll hatch into one little larva. And then, again, trigger warning, the larva hatches out, burrows into the spider, and over a period of weeks, eats the spider from the inside out, trying to avoid its internal organs as long as possible to keep the spider as long as possible, emerges, it pupates, and then emerges as the adult Tarantula Hawk from inside of the now deceased tarantula to continue the reproductive cycle. So this is definitely a case of symbiosis where it really doesn't benefit the tarantula. If you stuck with me through that or just skipped this last little part, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. That whole playlist of top 5 or just 5 really cool different species of reptiles. Doesn't always necessarily have to do with reptiles. We talk a lot about insects and amphibians and a bunch of really cool things. If you want to go check out that playlist, it really helps me out. YouTube is still mad at me for some reason and doesn't really want to be pushing my content, so it really helps me out. It's greatly appreciated. Like and subscribe, all of that back end. Have to do this social media nonsense. Hope everyone's having a great day, and we will check you next time.